everybody. Welcome to our latest edition of Science Bytes. I am Miss Nicole with Bloomfield Public Library, and today we are going to learn a little about how stems of a flower work, how water moves through those stems and keeps our flowers alive. And we're going to do that with a project called Color Changing Flowers. So how exactly does water move through a flower? And in particular, a flower that has been cut off of its original plant or its bush. We are going to get a little peek into how that works by using white carnations. And the nice thing about white carnations is that they are pure white. So it gives us a really neat opportunity to use some color to test our assumptions and to see exactly how water is moving through the stem of this flower. We are going to actually see two processes in motion here. One is cohesion. It's going to be cohesion between water molecules. And two, we're going to see something called transpiration. The way I like to remember this word is it makes me think of the word transport. If we had a car and we were moving something somewhere, we'd be transporting it somewhere. Transpiration is the act of water molecules moving through the stem of that flower. They're transporting water molecules, transpiration. One thing that many of us know about water is that water likes to evaporate. If we had a glass of water sitting on the table, over time, that water level would get lower and lower because that water is evaporating. The water molecules are turning into a gas and disappearing into the air. Another thing we know about water molecules is that they like to stick together. So if I have a water molecule here, and they're anywhere near each other, they're going to want to stick together. And lots of water molecules like to stick together. It's like a little chain. So anytime they're near other water molecules, they want to stick to those water molecules. So now let's look at our flower. So our flower has this nice stem, and this stem is full of all sorts of little tubular pathways going up towards the flower. What's happening, and this is how we get our transpiration. So as water makes its way up the stem to the flower, it's evaporating. And that act of evaporating actually starts pulling additional moisture up the stem because those water molecules are stacked together like a little chain, and almost like if you were drinking from a straw. So as that water evaporates from the flower and the leaves and maybe even parts of the stem, they are actually pulling more water molecules up that stem to take their place. So that's how the flower is staying healthy, with root systems or without. If we put this in a glass of water, that's how it's staying healthy. As long as we don't block this pathway that brings water into the stem, this flower is going to stay healthy. Now, one of the reasons why we sometimes get flowers that start to get shrivelly and brown is that air gets inside those pathways. And these are very tiny pathways. Think of a lot of teeny little tubes going up the stem. So if water gets in those tubes, it's likely that those water molecules won't be able to get past that bubble of air. So now for the fun part. We are actually going to test to see how that water gets up to our flower. And there's a couple different ways we can do this. You will have to buy carnations from home. I actually got my carnations from Stop and Shop. But you can go to most florists and they will have some sort of white carnations on hand. They're very inexpensive. If you swing by the library, both of our locations, I will provide you with 2 test tubes. So we can actually do a couple of different variations of this experiment at home. And then you'll just need some water, and you will need, for this project, for my younger scientists, some adult assistance for this one, because we do have a step that requires use of a sharp knife, and we want to be very careful with that knife. So make sure that you have an adult on hand to help you with one of the steps of this process, or at least somebody to supervise you while you're doing this part of the process. So here is my carnation, and you can see it's got a very long stem. And the first thing you want to do with any cut flowers that you bring home to make sure that they stay nice and healthy is you want to cut off about 3 or 4 inches from the stem at the bottom. You want to make sure that any air that might be clogging the bottom part of the stem isn't going to prevent water from getting in that stem. And the best way to do that is to use a sharp knife. If you use scissors, you can use scissors, but scissors are a little rougher on the stem and don't make as clean a cut. And that can introduce air as well. So here I've got my sharp knife. And again, make sure you either have adult supervision or you have an adult help you with this part of the process. So I'm going to cut at an angle. I'm just going to lop off the bottom part of the stem here, like that. So now I've cut it at a little bit of an angle, you can see. And now we're ready for, this is the difficult part. What we're going to do is actually cut our stem down the center in half. Now I will say this is the trickiest part of the process, and it's very difficult to do this very evenly. Despite your best efforts, you are probably going to get one side that's a teeny bit thinner than the other side, but do your best. And I say this to my young scientists who are being supervised or the adults who are helping them. Do your best to cut as evenly as possible down the center. And the way I like to do it is I use the tip of my knife, and I use that as a guide. So here I'm going to insert it. Let's do it here. And I'm going to cut very slowly because I want to try and get as evenly as possible down the center of that stem. And you can see I've done a decent job of cutting that stem in half. So that was probably the hardest part of our project, cutting that stem evenly down the center. And here I'll show you again. I've cut a good chunk of that stem in half. Now that's not going to kill our flower because remember, there are lots of tiny, tiny, tiny tunnels going up that stem, lots of them. So right now I've sort of split those tunnels in half. We have some tunnels coming up side A and some tunnels coming up side B. So now we get to introduce color and have some real fun with this. But first I want to give you a quick word about the test tube that I gave you. I gave you two of these. So we have the test tube and we have the cap that it came with. We are not going to put the cap on the top. We are going to use it as the base for our test tube because these actually will press into the cap and form a nice base. And you will have to wiggle it around a little so that it stands straight, but these are a nice little base for what we're about to do. So there is the first test tube that I showed you, and I will give everybody two. Because the fun with this project is that you can do either two different colors or you can do one color and then use plain water as what we call your control. So the plain water won't make any changes to the carnation. It'll remain the same color it started out being. Whoops. So remember, you're going to take this cap and just press until you feel it pop into place. Now you want to use liquid food coloring for this. Sometimes when people have food coloring on hand at home, it's a gel food coloring to be used in cake making or to use with making different frostings. But you definitely want to use the liquid food coloring. I like to use two contrasting colors. So think of two colors that are very different. And I actually liked the result when I did blue and red. Now if you're not very familiar with how colors combine, let me tell you that red and blue, when combined, make purple. Now, it will be interesting to see if we are able to create purple in our carnation, which we have split in two, or if the two colors stay separate, if we get half of a flower that's blue and half of a flower that's red. So the key to this is that you want to concentrate the color as much as possible too. When I was doing some of my earlier tests, I watered down the food coloring too much, and then the results, I still got results, but they weren't as striking as when I concentrated that color. So you want to use a good amount of this food coloring. Normally, I tell people to use food coloring conservatively in projects. This time, we're not going to do that. I'm going to use about 20 drops each of my colors in my little test tubes, and then fill them with water. So here I'm going to make my test tube on the right blue, and again I'm going to add 20 drops, or about 20 drops. All right, that's 20, give or take 1 drop. And now I'm going to add my red to the test tube on the left. Now we just need to add our water. I'm going to slowly add water to both test tubes. And you can fill it pretty close to the top. Okay, now you can see we've got red and we've got blue. And so now I'm going to take my flower with its split stem and I'm going to put 1/2 of my stem in the red and 1/2 in the blue. Now you want to do this carefully because you don't want to tip your test tubes over. I'm going to take this like this and I'm going to push it in place. And here I've pulled back so you can get a good look at it. So I've got my white carnation standing in my 2 test tubes. Now I will say, look at the height of that carnation. Over time, you may find that your carnation flops over to one side. And usually that's because you may have cut the stem too thin on one side. Now here is an example of a flower I did several days ago. Again, with the red and the blue. I'll tilt down so you can see. Now I used 2 glasses. And you're gonna say, Miss Nicole, what's up with all that tape? Well, that's because when I cut that stem in half down the middle, I had it a little lighter on one side, and that one side of the stem bent. And I'll give you a good look of it. So you can see it sticking out over here. You can see how it's popping out. And that's because it wasn't strong enough to support the flower. That weaker side of my stem started to actually pop out on its own because it couldn't hold its shape. So my solution was to use Scotch tape to hold everything together. And so you can try a different solution. We are scientists. See if you can come up with a better solution. That was my solution to hold up my flower. But you can see how there's an even split between blue and red in my flower. So the half of the stem that was in the blue colored the carnation blue, and the half that was in the red colored everything red. Now, interestingly, if you look very closely here in the center area, it looks like there was a little moment of combination in the flower where there must have been one of those tiny tubes that brings water up the stem must have merged the 2 sides when it got towards the top of the flower. So we have a little bit of purple happening in the center. That's what it looks like to me. Your eyes may tell you something different, but it looks to me like we've got a little bit of purple right down the middle of that flower. But it's mostly separate. We have the blue and the red. And that's our whole project. Now, as I started to tell you, you can turn this into a really neat science project. You could test every one of those colors that came in the box of food dye. We had red, blue, green, and yellow. You can test different combinations, test with just one color and the control. So have in one of your test tubes your favorite color, and then in the other one, just put clear. And you'll see an image here of when I did that with just red and clear water. So that's my control. There's nothing in that plain water. And you'll see that half the carnation got colored with red and half stayed its original white. So there are a lot of different variations of this testing you can do. You can also try with different amounts of the food dye. Try with just a few bits of the food dye versus the 20 drops that I used. Now I will tell you that you may find over time, because the flower starts to lean a certain way, that your test tubes become a little tipsy. If you find that happens, what I did at one point is I actually took those 2 test tubes and I just put them inside a tall drinking glass. So now if they wobble a little, it's okay. They're still going to hold up my flowers. Don't forget to pick up your white carnations. I would recommend getting more than one because it's very possible when you do that first time when you're trying to cut the stem in half, things may go very wrong. And if you chop too much of the stem off or you don't have enough left to do something with your flower, you'll want a spare flower or 2 on hand so that you can make sure you try that cut again. Don't forget to come by both of our library locations to pick up your test tubes. You can do this in plain drinking glasses too. I did it both ways. So if you don't have a chance to get to the library or we run out of supplies, no worries. Just use regular drinking glasses. And that is it until next time. So everybody have fun with this one, and I will see you soon.